A man who took millions of dollars in backhanders in what a judge described as a, quote, sophisticated, end quote, Pokie machine fraud has been jailed for 4.5 years. Marlborough racing personality Michael O'Brien was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today after being found guilty of 5 charges of obtaining by deception. A second man, Kevin Pokie, was sentenced to 12 months home detention after being found guilty of 1 charge of obtaining by deception. Our court reporter, Anne-Marie May, filed this report.
Between 2010 and 2013, Michael O'Brien was effectively the operator of the Blenheim-based gaming machine society, the Bluegrass Trust, but hid his involvement from the Department of Internal Affairs, which regulates the gaming industry. The department considered he was unsuitable for such a position as a result of his involvement in an earlier trust which had also been investigated. The Crown Prosecutor Grant Burston said O'Brien paid money to racing clubs to benefit himself, and the clubs felt they had no choice but to pay him 1/3 of what they received if they were to get any Pokie grant funding.
The millions of grant funding paid by the racing clubs back to Michael O'Brien went to benefit him personally and deprived the racing clubs and other community organisations of much needed funding. Mr. O'Brien's offending was selfish and greedy.
O'Brien's lawyer Bruce Squire QC said there was no evidence his client lived a lavish lifestyle as a result of his offending. He said numerous references provided to the court for sentencing referred to his client's community involvement.
A man who was generous with his time and efforts in supporting the community activities in which he has become involved, and I add to that the evidence that you heard at trial that he was also a man who was generous with giving away funds to friends and acquaintances who fell on hard times.
Mr Squire said O'Brien now recognised he had a gambling addiction which may have contributed to his offending, and he had given up training horses to remove himself from temptation. He asked Justice Dobson to grant various sentence discounts which would have made O'Brien eligible for home detention, but the judge refused, saying O'Brien's deceit struck at the heart of gambling regulation.
You distanced yourself from the organisation of the trust. You represented your father as acting in your place by forging his signature on relevant documents and sending emails purporting to come from him. It was relatively sophisticated, of deceiving those who were entitled to rely on the integrity of the applicants.
Kevin Pokie's lawyer also sought home detention for her client, saying he played a lesser role in the offending. Justice Dobson agreed, but highlighted the significance of Pokie's previous employment as a gambling inspector.
Your identity as a director was material, at least in an implicit sense, for the DIA, because even if only subconsciously, the officers would have taken a measure of comfort from your relevant experience in the sector and also your earlier experience as a DIA compliance officer.
A third man, Paul Max, will be sentenced later this month for his involvement in the fraud. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.